Hello, this is cjhoyle. Today is Saturday, April 11th, 2020, and I'm standing on Lake Shore Boulevard West, where it crosses the Etobicoke Creek. Today I'm riding my 1992 Iowa Linear Recumbent Bike, which has an action camera mounted on the front of it, and in this video I'm going to be riding east and giving a narrated tour of Lake Shore Boulevard. So as I begin my way heading east, you'll see on the right we're going past a sign which says "Welcome to Toronto, Ontario's capital." So the Etobicoke Creek forms the western boundary of Toronto with Mississauga. At least it does in this part of the city. And the first sort of area of Toronto that we'll be passing through, well, this first area is part of the former borough of Etobicoke. But this first area here is called Long Branch, and in fact, if you were to turn left at this intersection, you'd go into the Long Branch GO station, which is a commuter train rail station, which takes people into the city, and I guess also in the west direction as well, if you wanted to go out to Burlington or Oakville or other destinations that are west of the city. And over on the left, there's also the terminus of the streetcar line. If I turn my camera over this way, but you can see a red streetcar that's parked. So that's a loop where the streetcars turn around, and those streetcars travel a very long distance. In fact, this is the very longest streetcar line in the city. It's the 501 Queen streetcar, which travels almost 25 kilometers, I think. It's the longest in Toronto. It might be the longest in the world even. You know, continuous tram streetcar type of line. Up ahead on the left, there's some on-ramps which go on to Highway 427, which is a major freeway that goes north-south through the west end of Toronto. And this here is where the bike lane that's on Lake Shore begins. And this part here is part of the former community of Long Branch. This is sort of their central business district, I believe. I should mention that Etobicoke Creek, where we started, apparently there's a trail which follows along the Etobicoke Creek. I've never ridden it, but apparently it goes pretty far. I think they've just been filling in some gaps in that trail fairly recently. And although there's a bike lane here, I don't really ride this very often. In fact, today is my very first time riding this. I did ride it in the other direction to get to the start point, but normally when I'm coming to this end of the city, I'll take the waterfront trail or the signed bike route that's, you know, the part of the waterfront trail that comes through Long Branch is just some residential streets which are a few blocks to the south of here. So if I turned, you know, right onto this street here, this is 35th Street, that would eventually take me to one of those streets that I would normally be taking that just goes along some houses that are right up along beside the waterfront. But it's nice that there's also these bike lanes here that go right, you know, through this business district area, because although I don't see myself, you know, riding this very frequently, for the people that live in this neighborhood and shop at these businesses and, you know, eat at these restaurants, it's great for them to be able to, you know, ride to that destination on a safe bike lane like this. So this video is being filmed on the Saturday of the Easter long weekend, April the 11th. Over on the left, we just went past the Long Branch Public Library, which I think is kind of funny because libraries are often called branches. If you have multiple libraries in a library system, you'd have the, you know, this particular branch or that particular branch, but it's funny that this is the Long Branch Library, but Long Branch is just the name of the area. Branch is already in the name regardless. Today is a Saturday, but not exactly a typical Saturday because life these days has not exactly been typical. This, of course, is being filmed during the COVID-19 pandemic, where as a human race we're banding together and doing our best to social distance and isolate ourselves from one another to help stop the spread of this deadly disease. So a lot of the businesses that are along here on a regular Saturday, they will probably be hustling and bustling, and lots of people out, and all these parking spots to my right would probably be all filled up. But right now, most of these businesses are closed, and those that are open are, offering sort of limited services compared to what they normally would offer. So not quite a typical experience of what Lakeshore Boulevard would look like, but it does open up a great opportunity for me to make this video because it makes this road a lot more appealing for riding on because there's just a lot less traffic out and about right now. So we're just about to get to a park coming up on the right, which is called Colonel Sam Smith Park, and within it there is the Humber College Lakeshore campus. So Humber has colleges all throughout the Toronto area. I believe there's 3 of them, and this is not their original location. But the college here was built surrounding and as part of a psychiatric hospital that used to be here. It was called the Lake Shore Psychiatric Hospital. And it operated for more than 100 years, I think. So in fact, if I sort of tilt the camera down this street here, you can see some of the old buildings that were part of that psychiatric hospital. It was sort of built in a way where, to make it different from a typical hospital, to make, because the patients are presumably there for a really long time, they try to make it feel sort of more open and stuff, rather than just like you were in this big building all the time. So it's called, they called it cottages. So there's many smaller buildings that are sort of put together like cottages, and it's down near the lake. And so yeah, kind of a unique place. So then when it's eventually closed, it has been turned into a university, or not a university, but a college campus. So many of those buildings were just gradually converted into various different things that the college needed. So the bike lane disappears here, and on a normal day, like, this would not be a fun place to ride because the traffic would be so thick that you'd be getting honked at and people would not have any patience for you. But right now the traffic is, well, it's busier than I'd like, but I'd still say relatively quiet. Colonel Sam Smith Park, also at the south end of it, kind of down near the water, there's a big plant, or kind of the location of a former, like a heating plant that was used for heating all the buildings on the campus. And in front of it, there are all of the buildings of the psychiatric hospital, I mean. And in front of it now, they've restored it, and there's a skating loop that you can go and skate on in the winter. I mentioned earlier that I normally would ride along the waterfront trail as opposed to riding right here on Lakeshore Boulevard. I actually made a video showing that other route that I would normally take. So if you haven't already seen that, I'll provide a link in the description below. So this area here, after we get past the Colonel Sam Smith Park, we're now beyond Long Branch, and this area here is called New Toronto. So this is sort of the central business district of New Toronto. So Lakeshore Boulevard used to be part of the Ontario Highway 2, which is a long road that went all the way from Burlington into Toronto and actually further. I mean, Highway 2 goes, you know, all the way across Ontario to the very eastern end of Ontario as well. So it seemed like this would be a pretty logical place for, you know, businesses to form around, being that this is sort of the main street for this area. The street before it was kind of converted to being from Highway 2, this used to be called Lakeshore Road. And in fact, it still is called Lakeshore Road out in Mississauga. But it's Lakeshore Boulevard in Toronto, and the other interesting thing is that in Toronto, it's Lake Space Shore, so it's two words, Lakeshore Boulevard, as opposed to Lakeshore Boulevard. And, but humorously, there's various different places along the way where they've spelled it wrong. So it's been kind of inconsistent in its naming. And it's very common for people to spell it, you know, with the space or without the space. Got a red light here. This is 5th Street we're crossing. One thing that characterizes New Toronto is that the streets running in the north-south direction are all numbered. So the further west you go, the higher the numbers get. And that was a tradition that was started, or not a tradition, but it was a sort of a city plan that was started in New Toronto, and eventually they adopted and renamed their streets in Long Branch to match, so that the numbers could continue going up as you continued going west. Today the temperature is around 5 or 6 degrees Celsius with a pretty strong wind from the west, so I've got a wind behind me right now, which I certainly am appreciating. It felt a lot slower and colder when I was riding in the other direction to get to the starting point to make my video. But yeah, it seems seasonably cold for April. So if I were to be riding my regular route along the lakeshore, I would sort of come up that street I just went past, which is 1st Street, and then I would be riding on this bi-directional multi-use bike lane type thing that's over on the right. But I'm deciding to ride on the main traffic lane today, just because I'm trying to differentiate from what I normally do, and also because with the pandemic and the social distancing, we've been encouraged to stay at least 2 meters apart from other people, and that bike lane over there is kind of too narrow for people to pass each other. I'm not actually seeing anyone coming in the other direction right now, but I've been just generally, and as a general rule of thumb, I've just been trying to stay off of regular dedicated infrastructure. Aside from, you know, painted bike lanes, I've been trying to avoid multi-use trails because, yeah, like I said, it's pretty much impossible when you've got, you know, people walking their dogs and people walking and running and people biking in both directions. You're bound to, you know, break that, go within each other's 2 meter bubble. So yeah, I make a point of not riding on those trails. But the great thing is that it opens up, you know, new opportunities for me. Like today, I would never have chosen to ride, or on a regular day, under regular circumstances, I would never choose to ride my bike along the entirety of Lakeshore Boulevard. But because of the reasons I just explained, it's allowing me to try new things, and I'm finding that because the traffic is so light that a lot of these roads that I wouldn't normally choose to ride on are a lot more appealing to ride on. So yeah, these multi-use or these bi-directional bike lanes over on my right, those were added just a few years ago. Before that, the waterfront trail terminated at Norris, and if you wanted to keep going, you had to ride on this road like I'm doing right now, which, again, under regular circumstances is not a nice place to ride. Yeah, it's really quite cold today for kind of what I was expecting. It's gotten colder again. Like, I'm wearing my gloves today for riding, which I thought I had put those away for good, but I'm definitely glad to have them today. 2 weekends ago, there was a weekend where I made my video where I went riding on Mount Pleasant, and I filmed that video on a Saturday morning because it was supposed to be a very rainy weekend, and it was, but on Sunday afternoon it got really, most of the rain went away, and I went out for a ride. Alright, just gotta wait for this. I went out for a ride, and it was just so warm that afternoon that I wore shorts and a t-shirt, and of course I brought extra layers to wear on top of them, but during the ride I never put those extra layers on, and I rode the entire ride just with shorts and a t-shirt, and felt very comfortable all the way along. Alright, there's Norris Crescent. As I said, that's where you would get to the waterfront trail from, but like I said, in this video we're going to be crossing the road less traveled for cyclists. One thing that surprised me about Lakeshore is how many sections of it actually have bike lanes on it. You know, throughout Long Branch and New Toronto, there was, you know, quite a bit of a section there that had bike lanes, just the painted ones, but it's nice to have a designated spot for the bikes to go. Got another red light here. This is Mimico Avenue that we're crossing, and I think this general area around us is called Mimico. Straight ahead you can see some condo towers that are built there. We'll be riding right past those. Those all sort of have sprung up in the last couple decades. There's quite a few of them. It's a very densely populated area. Prior to that, that area had more of a vacation-ish type of feel to it. It was just sort of the outside of the boundary of the city of Toronto at the time. And it was, of course, down by the lake. And they had all kinds of motels that people went and stayed at just outside of the city there. But none of those hotels are there anymore, and they've all been replaced by, or the land's all been redeveloped into condominiums. You can see another one of those streetcars. We'll be, again, following along beside those streetcar tracks for a bit longer, but those streetcars actually sort of head north, so they actually go along Queen Street eventually. Another red light here. Feel that red lights can be really hit and miss. Sometimes you can be riding along and you can just, you know, get all the greens and just never have to stop. But other times it seems like every block or so you're getting unlucky with a red light. So like I mentioned earlier in the video, today is the Saturday of the Easter long weekend, and Easter is kind of a unique weekend in that for some people you get 4 days off. They get the Monday and the Friday are holidays, but for lots of people, including myself, the Friday, which is called Good Friday, is a stat holiday, but the Monday is not a holiday. So the long weekend goes Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then you're back to work on Monday. Whereas most other long weekends that we have in Canada are built such that you have the Monday off in the weekend. We also have some weekends, which are not really weekends, and some stat holidays that just happen to fall, you know, wherever they happen to fall. Like Canada Day, it's always July 1st. Even if July 1st is not a Monday or a Friday, you can have a July 1st on a Tuesday or Wednesday or a Thursday too. But Easter's the only one where it's always a Friday that you get off. But Easter's also a different weekend every year depending on the phases of the moon. So kind of a unique stat holiday. All right, the bridge we're about to cross up ahead is for another creek. This is the Mimico Creek, which is a, you know, fairly minor water body. And then now we're pretty much into those condo central area of the Humber Bay West area. Lots of tall towers, some of them still under construction. Up on the left up ahead, there's a site which used to be a cookie factory. It's no longer there anymore. The site looks like it's just open land right now, so I'm sure it'll be turned into something eventually, but that's the old Christie cookie factory. So if you watch television commercials, like when I was a kid, you'd hear in the commercial, Mr. Christie, you make good cookies. That's the Christie Cookie Company. They make Oreos and Chips Ahoy and a couple others, I think. But not here anymore. Not too many big manufacturing operations that are in the city. What's left of that cookie factory, though, there is this tower, sort of looks like a water tower. I'm not sure what it actually was used for, but there's a red tower that you can see that's been left behind sort of as a memorial to the original factory. You might be able to see it. I can't see it quite yet, but it'll be up on the left up ahead. This is Marine Parade Drive, which is the entrance to Humber Bay Park East. So there, over on the left, you can see that red tower. It's probably hard to see. White and red tower. You can see it better from the Gardiner Expressway Highway. So here comes back my bike lane again, which is a nice thing to have. Again, this is kind of a residential area with all those condos and things, so I imagine people that live there would appreciate having this bike lane to be able to get to places along Lake Shore without having to go down to the waterfront trail. After Norris Crescent, where the waterfront trail goes back kind of to the south, that area is actually an official, like, multi-use trail as opposed to a signed route, so it's a very, very nice area to ride, and it stays like that for a really long distance too. All right, so if we were to turn to the left there, that would take us onto the Gardiner Expressway East, which is an elevated expressway highway that I've actually filmed the video on back at the Ride for Heart last year. But it pretty much runs parallel with Lake Shore Boulevard, at least through this part of the city. And over on the left, that is the streetcar stop, the very last one before it heads its way north and joins up with Queen Street. So it goes through that tunnel over there, which goes under the Gardiner Expressway. So Lakeshore, yeah, looks a lot different right here as it sort of narrows down from being, you know, several lanes at the point where I started down to just 2 lanes, one in either direction. And then beyond this next traffic light, it actually narrows down to just 1 lane, which is very unique. And in fact, the first time that I rode this, I was a little bit worried that I might be taking an on-ramp onto the highway, because it kind of looks like that. Because you can see the cars that are driving on the Gardiner. And I thought, uh-oh, I hope I'm not going to be riding on the highway. In fact, you're actually not allowed to ride a bike on the Gardiner Expressway at all. But no, actually, this is not the Gardiner Expressway. This is just part of Lakeshore Boulevard. I'm just going to take a quick shot here of the Humber River, which we're about to cross over. So if I swing myself and look over this way, that's the Humber River, and that's the big arch bridge, which takes you across the Humber River if you're riding on the waterfront trail. All right, so continuing my way, heading in the east direction. So now I'm crossing over the Humber River, which is it's a pretty major road, pretty major river, lots of water that flows down it. Now it's a little bit hard to see, but over to the right, there's a concrete statue, and that's often referred to as the Lucky Lion. And the Lucky Lion was built at the very end of the Queen Elizabeth Way, or the QEW, which is basically, if you go on the Gardiner Expressway and you head in the west direction, it eventually merges and becomes a provincial highway, which is called the Queen Elizabeth Way, or the QEW. And that sculpture was built at the entrance to the Queen Elizabeth Way before the Gardiner Expressway was built. So originally that would have been the very beginning, or not over to the right. They had to move the statue, but this area here used to be the very beginning of the Queen Elizabeth Way if you're heading in the west direction. This area here, in fact, didn't even exist. This used to just be water. I mean, this is Lake Ontario, where we're riding right now. It used to be part of the lake, and they infilled it, they built it out, and before they built the road, what they did was, this area was an amusement park. It was called the Sunnyside Amusement Park. Had all kinds of rides. This is back in the 1920s or so, but it lasted until the 1950s, when ultimately they demolished it and they built this road here instead of the amusement park. And I guess they left a little bit of sort of waterfront area over to my right for people to enjoy. And this area is still known by the name Sunnyside all these years later. So you can see that Lakeshore is a very busy road here. There's 4 lanes all heading in the same direction, and probably another 3 or 4 in the other direction as well. And we're just about to cross Ellis Avenue. I made a video earlier in the year, back in the beginning of February, where I gave a tour of Runnymede Road and Ellis Avenue, and my video ended just back there. Over on the left, you can see some dirt jumps way on the other side for the Sunnyside Bike Park. It's a neat little strip of land that they've taken, and they built some dirt jumps for people to go and ride their bikes and do, get lots of air on their bikes. It's kind of a unique park. So yeah, under these circumstances, Lakeshore, as you can see, it's quite not busy right now. I mean, there's really no other cars around me at this moment, but the cars kind of come in waves. So the traffic's sort of been stopped at a traffic light, and once that traffic light turns green, then I'm sure I'll have a big wave of vehicles coming past me. This next intersection is Colburn Lodge Drive, which if you were to turn left there, you would be going in the north direction, crossing underneath of the Gardiner Expressway, and then you'd be in High Park, essentially. Or High Park begins on the other side, up that way. So coming up on the right is a fairly large building that was built for people to go swimming, or for people to actually to change for going swimming. That was built in the 1920s, and apparently it was very popular for people to swim here at the time. So they built this giant building where people, like thousands of people, could swim or could change to go swimming. And then they realized a couple of years later that the water was actually kind of cold in Lake Ontario, so they wanted to build a pool instead. And behind that fence over on the right is the Sunnyside pool, or the Gust Rider Sunnyside pool. It was renamed relatively recently to recognize Gust Rider, but at the time that that pool was built, again back in the 1920s, supposedly it was the largest outdoor pool in the world. Probably all pools were outdoor at the time, but definitely the largest pool in the world, apparently. Over on the left is St. Joseph's Healthcare, which is a hospital. So right along here you can really see the waterfront trail that I would normally be riding on, just sort of beyond the trees on the right. It's actually quite wide there, so I think social distancing wouldn't be too much of a struggle for there. But there is much narrower parts like that where, as I said, it's inevitable that you're going to come in contact with others. Up ahead, we're about to go underneath a pedestrian walkway, or I guess bikes are allowed to go on it too, but a bridge that will take you across Lake Shore Boulevard, as well as the Gardiner Expressway further over to the left. Today's probably the nicest day of the weekend, according to the weather forecast. As I said, it's not particularly warm, but at least it's actually quite cloudy, but the sun was out earlier. So over on the other side, further over to the left, you can actually see a streetcar driving along the very top of the hill. So that over there is Queen Street. left, there's another pedestrian crosswalk for getting across the Gardiner. At this point, the Gardiner is kind of buried down in a canyon. It's sort of, they've sort of buried it, not buried it, but they've sunk it down into the ground below the regular grade. And right here you can see that Lake Shore Boulevard splits, just like it did earlier, where we lost a streetcar. The vehicles that are going westbound are over on the south side of the Gardiner, where the ones going eastbound are over on the north side. And they do that to facilitate people from being able to easily transfer from being on Lakeshore, which is more of a collector sort of a road, onto the Gardiner, which is more of an express sort of a road. So throughout this distance, these two run kind of parallel to one another and function like an express into collectors. So up ahead we'll be merging back up again with the eastbound traffic. Straight ahead you can see a building that has a green domed roof. That's one of the buildings which belongs to Exhibition Place, which is the annual location where the Canadian National Exhibition is held. Many other events are held there as well. Many of the buildings on Exhibition Place have a historic designation. They were built back in the 1800s. So the Canadian National Exhibition is an annual event that takes place the last 2 weeks of the summer every year. And they have all kinds of rides and events and games and food and all kinds of stuff. It's a very popular thing for Torontonians to do. I've actually only been to the X once in all my years living in the city. Over on the left there's a big white wind turbine. It's not spinning right now, even though it's a pretty windy day. I haven't seen that wind turbine spin in quite a long time. I think it's probably not functional at the moment. I don't know whether they're planning on decommissioning it or what exactly is going on. It's kind of unique because that wind turbine is much older than the other wind turbines that you see around Ontario, or the bulk of the wind turbines that you see in Ontario. I'm not exactly sure how old it is, but it's from an earlier era of wind turbines, and the amount of power that it puts out is significantly less than the ones that you see that are actually, used out in farmland and areas like that I've seen. Coming up on the right, in fact we're kind of already going past it, is Ontario Place, which was a sort of an amusement park for young children when I was growing up. It also hosts festivals or concerts. There's a concert venue there, which was called the Molson Amphitheater for a lot of years. It's since been renamed Budweiser Stage. And this bridge here you can see takes people from the parking lot over on the left to be able to get into Ontario Place and Budweiser Stage. Budweiser Stage is just coming up on the right. You can see it across the parking lot there. Fun fact about Exhibition Place, before it was used for festivals and things, it was actually used for the military. Many Torontonians are familiar with Fort York, but after Fort York, kind of got too small for, the size of the city, they built new Fort York, which was later renamed, but basically the land that was set aside for that was used for the military, but ultimately that land is no longer used by the military, and it's now used for, you know, the exhibition place, fairgrounds, and all the other stuff that goes along with the convention center and stuff. Straight ahead, of course, you can see the CN Tower as we're getting pretty close to the downtown core. I feel like all the cars are gone now. I don't see any cars in my rear view mirror for a long way, and only one coming in the other direction up ahead. And the sun's come out too. So Lakeshore Boulevard kind of curves around and heads a little bit north here as it follows along the waterfront of Lake Ontario. And once again, I'm riding right up along beside where the waterfront trail is. So this intersection here, if you're going to turn left, this is called Strachan. Strachan has an interesting spelling. It's spelled S-T-R-A-C-H-A-N. So if you didn't know it was called Strachan, you'd probably pronounce it Strachan. But the correct pronunciation is Strachan, of course. Well, anyway, that concludes part one of my tour of Lakeshore Boulevard here in Toronto. If you watched all the way to the end of the video, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Stay tuned for part two, and thanks for watching.